Welcome to Discover You Radio's discussion. Stay tuned for Dakota, Freeman, and Lauren Miller as they get into an intense debate regarding the subject matter as they give two separate opinions.
Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle addresses the diagnostic denier. That's the customer that doesn't want to pay the diagnostic after he got it. Get your copy at Amazon and Kindle. Your Guide to Customer Service by Brandon Eagle.
Welcome to Discover You Radio's discussion segment called The Debate, episode number 44. Thank you to Robert Simmons and Rita Fox for that deep dive in Chapter 1 titled Early Bird Entitlement, which helped us to gather notes for this debate.
Oh man, where do we start?
Yeah, seriously, right? I mean, it's quite the scenario.
It really is. Like, imagine you are just staring at the clock. You've been waiting exactly 20 minutes. You have somewhere to be, and the person behind the counter just offers you this deadpan stare, and a completely sterile fact about your wait time.
Oh, I've been there. We've all been there. It is agonizing.
Right. So, are they a villain? Or are they literally the only thing keeping the business from total collapse? Because if you're listening to this, you've probably been that anxious person in a waiting room feeling, completely ignored.
Oh, absolutely. So today we are looking at a scenario from Brandon Eagle's text that just perfectly captures this friction. A customer arrives at 10 a.m. for a 10:30 a.m. service appointment. They bypass the line, walk right up to the desk, and demand immediate attention because they, quote, have somewhere to be.
The classic early bird.
Exactly. Which brings us to the central question today. Is protecting a rigid schedule the ultimate form of good service, or does it cross the line into, cold bureaucracy and a complete lack of empathy? I'll be arguing that strict adherence to the schedule is the most ethical and, frankly, fair way to protect all customers and ensure the quality of the work.
And, I will be arguing that prioritizing rigid scheduling over human empathy, especially in high-stress situations, is an ethical failure. It just turns customer service into an adversarial bureaucracy.
Okay, so to kick this off, let's just look at the physical reality of an automotive shop, because that completely dictates the rules of engagement here.
Right, the actual physical space.
Yeah. When I read Brandon Eagle's text, it's clear the schedule isn't just like a spreadsheet. It is essentially a moral boundary. We have to recognize that a mechanic shop is not a walk-up, first-come, first-served drive-through.
No, obviously not.
Right, you have a finite number of technicians, a finite number of bays, and a day that is already meticulously mapped out based on physical labor. So, when the early bird arrives 30 minutes early and operates on what the text calls the customer logic loop.
Oh, that logic loop?
Yeah, this assumption that physical presence should just magically accelerate time. They are actively attempting to subvert a fair system. Protecting the schedule isn't about punishing the early bird. I mean, it is the only way to protect the customers who did things right, who showed up on time, and whose cars are already in the bays.
But
let me just finish this thought. If you give in to the early bird, you are basically deciding to sacrifice 3 other people's time to save one loud person 10 minutes. That is by definition inherently unfair.
Okay, but you're calling it a moral boundary, which is a bit of a stretch. Because honestly, what I see in this chapter is a deeply bureaucratic and profoundly unsympathetic mindset, just disguised as operational efficiency.
Unsympathetic? How so?
Well, let's break down that customer logic loop you mentioned. The customers believe that early equals faster service isn't some malicious, ego-driven plot to destroy the shop's day.
I mean, the text does call it an ego thing later on.
Sure, but it's a very natural human assumption in a fast-paced world. Like, if you show up early to a restaurant, sometimes you get seated faster. People apply that same logic everywhere.
Okay, but a restaurant isn't hoisting a 2-ton vehicle into the air.
True, but the psychology is the same. When a service advisor meets a stressed customer's urgency with perfectly accurate but completely cold responses, like just simply stating the wait will be an hour and 15 minutes without any relational padding, they are prioritizing operational rigidity over basic human empathy.
I don't know if I'd call it cold. They're just giving the facts.
But the text literally frames the customer as a delusion.
It explicitly calls it the "I got here first" delusion. That language transforms the whole service model into an inflexible system. The customer isn't viewed as a human being who needs help, but as like a hostile entity that needs to be defeated.
Look, I hear you on the harshness of the word delusion. It sounds aggressive. But look at how the advisor actually behaves in the text. They don't just stare blankly at the customer. They actively go into what Eagle calls solution mode.
Do they, though?
Yes. The advisor immediately offers alternatives to lessen the inconvenience. They offer a free loaner vehicle so the customer can make their other appointment. They offer to slide them into a cancellation spot if one opens up. They even offer to completely reschedule the whole thing. That is practical empathy in action.
Right, but
It's actionable. It's not cold bureaucracy. It's providing real-world logistical solutions while maintaining the structural integrity of the business.
wait, hold on. Yes, the options are offered, but look at the internal framing of that interaction. Offering a loaner car isn't true empathy if you're mentally glaring at the person while you do it.
Mental glaring?
Yeah, the text explicitly tells us what the advisor is thinking when they offer these options. They are mentally telling the customer, "You are not the main character. Please go stand with the rest of the cast."
Which is fair. They aren't the main character of the shop's day.
But that internal monologue reveals a fundamental contempt for the patron. The options aren't offered out of genuine care. They are treated like a courtroom settlement.
A courtroom settlement? That's a little dramatic.
It's a way to legally absolve the shop of responsibility while quietly judging the customer. It's an adversarial culture. And, customers aren't stupid. They can feel that underlying judgment. The shop breeds the very conflict it claims to want to avoid because of that contempt.
But that internal boundary is exactly what allows service workers to survive a 10-hour shift without burning out. Let's actually dig into the mechanics of why that boundary exists. Managing a tight shop schedule isn't hospitality in the traditional sense. It's air traffic control.
Oh, so we're comparing oil changes to aviation now?
Yes. Because you wouldn't demand an air traffic controller land your plane first, just because you have brunch plans, right? Because doing so causes a mid-air collision for the other planes. The auto shop is exactly the same.
Okay, let's unpack that.
When Eagle lists his 10 rules for the "I got here first" delusion, he's laying out the rules of airspace. If a shop is forced to operate like a NASCAR pit crew just because one customer mismanaged their morning, that objectively risks the safety of the whole operation.
I love the air traffic control analogy, I really do. But an air traffic controller communicates clearly and constantly with the pilots to keep them calm.
True.
They don't just tell a pilot, "You're in a holding pattern," and then put them on mute while silently hoping they run out of fuel.
That is not what the advisor is doing.
That's my issue with the 10 rules, though. The text instructs management not to hand the customer a trophy for volume, and it frames the customer's frustration as a digital tantrum. By using language like delusion and tantrum, the shop absolves itself of having to examine its own bedside manner.
Because the bedside manner isn't the primary product. The safe repair of the vehicle is.
But good service should be about de-escalation. It should be about meeting a customer where they are emotionally. When you label a frustrated patron as delusional, you're no longer in the business of hospitality. You're just a toll booth operator demanding compliance.
Well, let's walk through the actual mechanics of what happens when you give them that trophy for volume. If you pull a technician off a brake job to do a rushed oil change for the loud guy in the lobby.
Which I'm not saying you should do.
But that's what the customer wants. And if you do it, you aren't just pausing the brakes. You're breaking the technician's cognitive focus. You're risking a safety error. You're delaying the parts delivery for the next 3 cars in the queue. It's a massive domino effect.
I understand the logistics.
The primary mandate of an auto shop is safety, quality, and honoring agreements made with all patrons. Brandon Eagle makes a crucial point in the book. Fairness will always feel like unfairness to someone who wanted special treatment.
Right.
So true empathy in this scenario is systemic. The service advisor has to act as the protector of the invisible customers, the ones whose cars are already lifted on the hydraulic hoists.
Let me stop you right there. When you say systemic empathy, what does that actually look like in practice for the person who is currently white-knuckling the counter?
It looks like a functioning shop that gets their car done correctly.
Because to them, it just looks like you don't care. Systemic empathy cannot come at the total expense of interpersonal empathy. Let's look at the psychology of the waiting room. We've all been there. You experience a total loss of control.
Sure, you don't know what's happening behind those closed garage doors. So let's look at the specific moment in the text when 20 minutes pass. The 10:30 appointment hasn't even started. The customer asks, "Do you know how much longer?" And the advisor responds, "Your vehicle is next to go into the shop."
Which is true.
This is the perfect illustration of empathy failure.
I completely disagree. I don't see the failure. The text points out that the schedule is doing exactly what it was designed to do, and the advisor gives an answer that is perfectly reasonable and perfectly accurate.
Because factual accuracy is not the same as human communication.
Oh, come on.
No, listen, the advisor knew the 10:30 appointment hadn't started. They knew the customer was visibly anxious, exhibiting what Eagle calls the illusion of control by standing at the desk, trying to somehow force the mechanic to move faster through sheer willpower. Right, which is unreasonable behavior.
Unreasonable or not, instead of recognizing that psychological stress and offering some conversational padding like, I don't know, I know you're in a tight spot with time. Thanks so much for your patience. We are right on schedule and you're next up. The advisor just delivers a cold, sterile fact.
And that's a crime.
Look at what happens. The customer explodes. They say, "You mean they haven't even started on it yet?" The advisor triggered that explosion. They were technically right, but relationally disastrous.
But why is the burden of emotional regulation placed entirely on the service worker?
Because they are the professionals in the interaction.
You're asking the advisor to play amateur psychologist for a customer who is behaving unreasonably. The customer's internal belief system, as Eagle outlines, is that their personal urgency automatically equates to the shop's emergency.
It's an emergency to them.
They assume that if they don't get exactly what they want instantly, it must be bad service. The advisor answered the question directly and honestly. We have to be careful about demanding that workers constantly massage the egos of customers who are actively ignoring the rules.
Massage their egos?
Yes. Eagle coaches rookies to remember that they are allowed to be kind and firm at the same time. Stating a fact clearly, your vehicle is next to go into the shop, is kind because it's truthful. It doesn't promise the impossible.
It doesn't promise the impossible, but it completely ignores the stakes, which brings us right to the ethics of rigidity in high-stress environments. Treating human urgency merely as ego, which Eagle explicitly does in his takeaway, saying early bird entitlement is not about time, it's about ego, is an enormous blind spot.
Is it? Or is it just calling out bad behavior?
We are talking about vehicles. To the vast majority of people, their vehicle is their livelihood. It's how they get to work, how they pick up their kids, how they manage a medical emergency.
I mean, nobody is denying that cars are important.
Right. So when a shop operates with zero margin for human error or anxiety, it ethically fails the community it serves. It creates an environment where any deviation from the perfect schedule is met with silent hostility. People aren't just dropping off a pair of shoes to be shined. They are handing over the machinery their lives depend on. Acknowledging that stress isn't massaging an ego. It's recognizing their shared humanity.
Okay, you're painting the customer as incredibly vulnerable, but that completely ignores the reality of the workplace dynamics. Let's look at rule number 9 in the text. Management must defend the schedule and the staff.
I agree they should defend the staff.
Eagle points out that caving, just this once, teaches the customer that yelling works. And more importantly, it teaches the staff that they don't matter.
Well, obviously you shouldn't reward yelling.
But if we prioritize the empathy of the loudest person in the room, the one having the digital tantrum, don't we inherently create an unethical workplace for the staff? You can't ask a service advisor to absorb verbal abuse just because someone needs to pick up their kids.
No, I'm not saying they should accept abuse.
Eagle writes that if management caves, you don't have a process, you have chaos with name tags. The ethical obligation of management isn't just to the community. It is to protect their employees from being steamrolled by patrons who believe the universe orbits their arrival.
You can protect your staff without turning the customer into an enemy, though. I agree that management shouldn't cave to yelling. Yielding to abuse destroys morale, but the dichotomy the text presents is entirely false.
How is it false?
It suggests that you either have chaos with name tags or you have a rigid, unyielding bureaucracy where the customer is a delusion. There is a massive middle ground here. The problem with the 10 rules is that they train the staff to view the customer with suspicion from the moment they walk through the door.
Suspicion is a strong word.
Look at rule number 2. It says that if a customer walks up to the empty desk, they are cutting and making themselves the story everyone tells later. That is an incredibly toxic way to view a simple misunderstanding. It assumes malice where there is only ignorance.
It doesn't assume malice, it observes behavior. Let's talk about the social contract of the waiting room.
Oh boy, the social contract.
Yes, the text describes the line of people sitting there, the tight jaws, the crossed arms, the shared look of, did they really just do that? The rules are designed to articulate the unspoken agreement between everyone in that room. The people who showed up on time and sat down did the adult thing, as the text puts it.
Right.
So when the early bird bypasses them without a greeting or a pause, launching immediately into, I have a 10:30 appointment, I'm here for an oil change, they are the ones breaking the social contract. The advisor is simply the enforcer of that contract. Without that enforcement, society literally breaks down into a free-for-all where the most aggressive person wins.
Okay, but the social contract of a waiting room is heavily dictated by the environment the business itself creates. If the business is so tightly wound that a person showing up 30 minutes early threatens to collapse the entire day, as the text literally claims, keep the day from collapsing just because someone set their alarm, then the business model itself is fragile.
It's not fragile, it's just fully booked.
Eagles states that showing up early can actually help everyone if the customer is flexible, but the shop itself is demonstrating zero flexibility. The text says your urgency does not equal the shop's emergency. While true, when that becomes your corporate mantra, you stop being a service provider.
But again, is it a fragile business model, or is it simply the reality of physics? A service bay can only hold one car at a time. A technician can only perform an oil change so fast before they risk stripping a drain plug or forgetting a filter. The schedule is a map of physical capacity. When the customer's logic loop kicks in, I showed up early, therefore I should be done faster, they are denying the physical reality of the shop. Eagle's advice to rookies is profound. You don't owe them a shortcut. You owe everyone the same process.
Right, process.
That process is what ensures the brakes actually work when the car leaves the bay. If maintaining that process requires a degree of rigidity, then rigidity is necessary.
Rigidity in the mechanical process? Absolutely. Nobody wants a rushed brake job. But rigidity in human interaction, that's where the failure occurs.
I just don't see them as separate things.
But they are. Look at rule number 7. Waiting by choice means accepting the wait. Loud sighing, dramatic watch checking, pacing won't make your vehicle appear faster. It just makes everyone silently hope you leave first.
Which is what everyone's thinking. But this reveals a culture where the staff is actively resenting the customer's presence. If a customer is pacing and checking their watch, an empathetic advisor might step in and say, "Hey, I know you're watching the clock. I just checked with the tech and we're still on track." Instead, the text advises the staff to silently hope the customer leaves. It's prioritizing a smooth operation over the actual humans the operation is supposed to serve.
You're ignoring the fact that the advisor already tried to help them.
Did they? Yes. The text explicitly instructs the advisor to go into solution mode earlier in the interaction. They offered the loaner car, they offered to reschedule. The text says you did everything right. They chose to wait, then they chose to be offended that waiting felt like waiting. Well,
there is a limit to how much a business can mitigate a customer's self-inflicted stress. The advisor set the expectations, was completely transparent, and gave the customer a chance to make a decision. The customer decided to stay and complain. At that point, the advisor's obligation is to hold the line, as this text says, while everyone else tries to move it. To me, that is the essence of professional integrity. But by strictly policing the timeline and treating every single interaction as a battle over who controls the clock, the shop loses the customer entirely. The text mentions that the customer storms out, shouting they're never coming back and leaving a 1-star review.
good riddance to a bad customer, frankly.
But Eagle dismisses this as a digital tantrum. From a business standpoint, if your process consistently results in customers feeling so unheard that they explode and leave forever, your process is flawed. You might have successfully protected your schedule, but you failed your primary objective of providing a service that people actually value and trust. You won the battle and lost the war.
Well, let me just summarize my position here. The schedule is the ultimate equalizer. When Brandon Eagle writes that an advisor is not failing when they protect the schedule and they are not rude for enforcing the line, he is articulating a profound truth about fairness.
Okay.
True fairness means the invisible customer, whose car is already in the bay, matters just as much as the loud early bird standing at the desk. Rigid adherence to the schedule protects the integrity of the work, the safety of the vehicles, and the fairness owed to all patrons. It is the bedrock of a functional service environment.
And my summary is this. Rigid adherence to a schedule, when stripped of genuine human empathy, devolves into a cold bureaucracy that antagonizes the very people it's meant to serve. A system that views human anxiety as a delusion and urgency as mere ego is fundamentally broken. It treats patrons as adversaries rather than people relying on a critical service for their daily lives. Good service requires flexibility, relational warmth, and the emotional intelligence to navigate high-stress situations without resorting to silent judgment.
It is definitely clear we have a significant divergence on whether the enforcement of these rules constitutes a necessary professional boundary or, as you say, a failure of empathy. However, I think we do find some common ground.
Oh, for sure.
We both agree that the clear communication of timeframes is essential. Furthermore, offering alternative options like the free loaner vehicle mentioned in the text is a crucial step in attempting to resolve the conflict, even if we disagree on the underlying intent of how those options are presented.
Yes, options are critical and communication is non-negotiable. The tension really lies in how a business balances operational efficiency with human anxiety, and whether strict enforcement in high-stress environments is the right tool for the job.
Very tension. It challenges us to define what we mean by good service when resources are finite and emotions run incredibly high. It reminds us that there are multiple ways to interpret fairness in the service industry, and navigating that line is, incredibly complex. Which brings us to the end of our discussion today. Thank you so much for your support, and that you can find your guide to customer service by Brandon Eagle on Amazon. You can get it in paperback form or Kindle.
They walk in the door, they see a line, and they pass it up and go right to your desk and scream, "I'm an employee!" They're not that special. Get your guide to customer service by Brandon Eagle. You can find it on Amazon and Kindle.
Thank you for listening to Discover You Radio's discussions. We'd like to invite you to research was spotlighted on this episode. And if they have a website, join their mailing list. Because listeners like you made it possible. Thank you for your support.